Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman. We have returning special guest Jordan, and what we're going to do for Jordan today is we're going to start a project that he came up with. Basically, what he wants to do is he wants to put manual locking hubs on the front of his 4Runner, and I'm going to let Jordan now take over and explain what he's bought for the job.
Sure. So what I'm doing is I have knuckles and CV axles from a Tacoma that was equipped with manual locking hubs. These hubs. What this lets you do when you turn the dial is it connects or disconnects the CV axle from the actual hub. The regular way the 4Runners are set up, the CVs are running all the time. Now you have the automatic differential disconnect in the center that basically takes the load off of them, but they're still spinning. With the manual locking hubs, you can completely disconnect it, which has some advantages, especially if you want to lift the truck and have extreme CV angles. So to do that, we have spindles from a Tacoma, and what we're doing today is basically taking them apart and just doing seals and bearings, and these ones also were missing the brake backing shield, so we're going to put those on as well.
Okay.
To do the swap, you would need to get the spindles and the CV axles from the Tacoma.
Okay.
That's really all that's different, otherwise it's pretty much plug and play.
Cool. All right. So Jordan did a really good job of explaining what he's doing and the benefits to it. And what we're going to use as a reference, of course, is the factory service manual. So I'm going to show you some pages out of the factory service manual we're going to use for this repair.
So today we're overhauling a pair of knuckles from a late 90s Tacoma equipped with manual locking hubs. This allows you to disconnect the CV axle from the hub, and these came on some of the base model Tacomas that did not have the A.D.D automatic differential disconnect system. So we have these knuckles, and our goal today is to take the hubs out, take the bearings apart, press in new bearings, put in new seals, and put it all together so it'll be ready to install on a truck. So we have to start by taking the hubs off, and I have these bolts loosened already, but there's 6 bolts on the dial face. They're very small. They're a 10 millimeter socket.
Okay.
6 millimeter shank. And this is actually, all the old 4Runners, they have that 7. That goes on the hubs only.
Oh.
Yeah, you see that
All
a
right,
lot.
good to know.
Yep. Dial face comes off. You can see this is the mechanism that slides in and connects the inner hub gear to the hub body, and the CV shaft actually slips through here and connects into this inner hub gear.
All right.
So take off these acorn nuts from a first gen, so I decided to use them because they look kind of cool.
Oh, that's what those came from.
Yeah, otherwise they're just regular
nuts.
And then they have a washer.
A washer.
And a cone washer. The cone washer helps center it and makes it a stronger bond. But the whole thing should
pop
slide
off. Okay.
We got all our fasteners, and there we go.
So this is the first thing you would do if you're going to do this manual hub conversion for your Tacoma or your 3rd gen 4Runner.
I think that these knuckles can also be used on things like Sequoias. And
stuff. Sequoias too.
Certain Sequoias and Tundras that this will work on.
Sick mods. We're talking sick mods here. All right.
So you can see in here, I'm just going to spin it so you can see. There we go. So that's the hub. The hub is held onto the bearing, and it preloads the bearing with this nut. The first thing we need to do is remove this seal. This is the seal that interfaces with the CV axle, and then we're going to take the nut off. So to start with the seal, we're going to use your puller.
We're going to pull out the seal right here, and we're using this slide hammer puller. In order to get both arms in, we were able to get one arm into this bracket first, and then we had to keep this one loose, hook it in there because we couldn't hook them in both at the same time. So got one arm in, hooked it in, then bolted it into this puller. If you don't have this type of puller, just use whatever you got. And now with a buddy holding it, I'm going to slide hammer it up and we're going to pull this seal out. So Jordan's going to be holding the knuckle right here, And then I'm going to slide hammer this and pull it up. So you'll watch the seal come out right here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, right there. Seal is out. Okay. Still trying to figure out why the guy packed so much grease in there.
I know, right?
If you're wondering about the comment I just made, we're wondering why the previous person packed us with so much grease. Because really the grease isn't really doing anything. It's running on a bearing, right? Mm-hmm. So what this guy packed us full of grease for, we have no clue.
There need to be some grease on the inside here.
Yeah, the side where the shaft goes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but here, I mean, this is like, he was packing it like there was ball bearings there. I don't know.
Yeah,
okay.
Knows?
So this outer seal went in like this, and we just pulled it out with the puller. You could use whatever puller that floats your boat, but these slide hammer pullers like so work pretty nice.
The next step is we need to remove this ring nut. This screws onto the back of the hub and holds it into the bearing. And so we have this special spanner tool that fits in. What we're going to do, since it's about 200 foot-pounds of torque, is actually bolt the knuckle into a spare tire and then do what we need to do.
This thing that Jordan just described, this set nut, you basically set it into this indentation to where it won't back off. What we notice is that trying to pry that thing back out, we just kind of mangle it a little bit. So it actually, when this thing spins up, it's really not going to get in the way of much. So we found that we could remove this without having to try to bend that out at this time. What we do before we reassemble it is we take a punch and bend that out, get rid of that nub when we insert it. But to take it off, it's not a big deal. So we just leave that and take it off as is. So this is what we got going on. We got a spare tire. We've got an old rotor. And then we got the knuckle that we're working on. So what we're going to do is put a couple lug nuts and cinch this whole assembly with the rotor and the knuckle onto the wheel, and the wheel is then going to be our ability to hold it firm while we break this loose, because like Jordan said, it's held at 205 foot-pounds. So we need a lot of leverage to hold this in place. So right now Jordan is holding the assembly. He's going to tilt it up, and I'm going to get a couple lug nuts started. 2 seems to be enough. Just do them opposing. And then cinch it up with your gun or your lug nut wrench. Okay.
Okay, so here's the tool for taking off this set nut. It's a little bit of a friction fit, so we're going to tap it into place. Tap it flush. Good. Take our breaker bar.
Breaker bar. Now I'm going to hold the wheel firm while he gives it some force. There we go. And what I was doing with my hand is I was holding it, because the tool's actually walked up on them already. This thing with the 4 pins wants to try to rock out of the holes, so I was holding pressure so it would be less likely to do that. See how it rocked out? So putting a little downward pressure, this is even more important when you're tightening it up at the end of the job. You want to push downward pressure so it doesn't walk out on you. Underneath the nut, there's a washer, and he's just going to use a magnet to pick it up. It's stuck in the grease.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the washer. So show the washer. Big thick spacer or washer, what do you want to call it? We're just going to take the knuckle back off of the spare tire. There we go. We're going to drive out this hub from the knuckle here. And so what we need to do is we need to gain some height to where we give room for this knuckle to go down. So what we came up with over here is we've got the Harbor Freight press plates, and then I bought a regular 4x6 section of wood, and I cut 2 12-inch sections off of it from Home Depot, like 15 bucks. And then we have that sandwiched. I bought a couple more plates from a local fabrication shop, 1 inch thick by 4 inches by 12 inches long. And so that's going to help disperse the load. And then what we're capturing the hub with is 2 other press plates that are capturing the whole load. And then we're getting right underneath like these nubs of the knuckle. And then on the back side, same thing, we're we're capturing up a pretty meaty part of the knuckle.
This is actually the boss where the backing plate would bolt on.
Yeah, where the backing plate will bolt on right there. So again, that's our setup. So we have the wood sandwiched between two plates, Harbor Freight plate, one that I just got at a fab shop, 4 inches wide, 12 inches long, 1 inch thick. And then this is another bar that is 1 inch thick, and I can't remember how wide it is, but it doesn't really matter. It works.
There's a brass bushing here, and the driver that we're using, we're trying to actually sit on the steel part and not on the brass. So this piece goes around it perfectly. So that's what we're going to drive with.
Now, if you didn't have a press sleeve kit in this, you might be able to find maybe some type of pipe, like maybe a piece of gas pipe that would work. We have this press sleeve kit over here that has all these different size sleeves. It's a little bit pricey. I got it on eBay for 130 bucks, but it's nice because it has a ton of sizes for a lot of applications. So you have a lot of different tools to work with. And so we found one, like Jordan says, that fits the outer diameter. It goes right over that brass, but it doesn't hit it. It hits the next part of the sleeve right there. This is just a regular Harbor Freight press that you can get for, depending on if you find it on sale, anywhere from like 170 bucks to a couple $100. Works pretty good. It's a 20-ton press.
Now our goal here is to actually press the hub out of the bearing and leave the bearing in the spindle. So let's see what happens.
And what we noticed the first time is the bearing came with it in parts. So this might happen to you, and we'll show you on the other one. If this one actually works the way we hope it does, we'll show you what the disaster of the other one and how we had to get it out the rest of the way. So I'm applying pressure.
It's coming.
Okay, it gave. This is what happened the first one. It gave a little bit, then it got harder. Maybe this one's going better. We'll see.
I hope so.
It's going pretty smooth, Jordan.
Don't jinx it. You jinxed it,
It's
Tim.
loading up. It's loading up again. It's loading up. I think the bearing's coming with it.
No, keep going.
Maybe we got lucky on this one.
We did.
So, okay, there. There it is. It's out.
And there is our hub.
Well, the hub came out clean.
The hub. All right.
Okay, the last one we had to cut off part of the bearing, so that's awesome. So we'll show you how we fixed that other one that got stuck.
So the next thing we need to do is pull off this oil seal. This is the seal. It's kind of a dust seal between the knuckle and the hub when it's in place. And then there's a circlip underneath that we'll take off next.
So this is the seal right here, this outer thing. And we're just going to get a 3-jaw puller and we're just going to slide hammer it off. Here's the setup. We got the 3 jaws grabbing right behind the edge of it. And there's another one over here. And then he's just going to slide hammer it off. Okay, go for it, Jordan. There it is. It's off.
There it is.
Easy as pie. So what we noticed is the bearing came out a little bit and was pushing pressure on this C-clip. So we basically took a hammer and we just pounded this thing back away from the clip. And then now Jordan's technique is he's grabbing on those lips and then we just push it back in, but he'll get it. We got it out a little bit.
At least. Now if we have a small screwdriver, we can pry it.
Got it out a little bit. He's going to just try to pry it out now. There we go. He's prying around the edge with the screwdriver. Yeah, you can work it out right there now. Just with your hands probably. Bearing's probably still up against it just a little bit. So yeah, the bearing was loading up that clip and we weren't able to get it out. But
we're actually going to replace this clip.
yeah, you don't reuse it.
Good to assume, like this one, you probably could. We just assume that it's going to get kind of deformed.
Yep. So that press sleeve that got stuck in, it's still stuck in, but we're going to work around it. We're going to put a press sleeve, a greater diameter over the outside, and then just press right over the top of it and it'll work. And then we'll get that sleeve out later once we got the bearing free. This is the bigger sleeve that we're putting over the top here. It fits the diameter of the bearing pretty good. Now Jordan's going to rock it in place here. And I'm going to put this over the top. There you go. And that's our setup. Just like how we press the hub out, now we're going to get the bearing up the same way by using the same setup with the press plates, the 4x6, and then the press sleeve to drive it out. All right, so here's the pressing happening here again. Is it lined up good?
Yep. Keep going.
Okay. That's going up pretty easy. Should be dropping out any time, I think, huh? There it is. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so this is the bearing with one of my press sleeves stuck in it. We got to get this sucker out, but I think we're just going to drive it out with another press sleeve that's a little bit smaller than this inner diameter, and it'll hit the lip of the press sleeve and we'll drive it out. So I want my press sleeve back out of this bearing. So I just got it captured again by a couple bars. Press sleeve that's a little bit smaller than that inner diameter, and I'm going to press the sleeve out the other side. There we go. Now I got my press sleeve back. You can see it wiped off the gold anodizing or whatever. So it's kind of changed it a little bit. But you can see how far it was driven in. And then now that is the actual bearing. It's a big burly bearing for these front wheel hubs.
Okay, so we have cleaned out the inside of the knuckle. And now here is the new bearing. It's a Koyo brand bearing. I didn't buy this from Toyota. I just bought it actually on Amazon, and it is actually the factory part. Now what we have read and seen is that you put the black side, the side with the rubber seal, down in so that the metal shielded side is up where the circlip goes. So basically we're going to do this and press it in.
So here's our setup to now press in the bearing. We have the Harbor Freight press plates as a base. Then we've got the 2 press plates and then 2 more on top of that just to give distance for the knuckle to hang off this backside. And we'll show you when we get the knuckle in place. So you can see the reason for the stacking of plates, it was to give space for that to hang off the backside. And so he's centering it underneath the press. Now what he's doing, we got this one, see the damage to this one? This was the first part of the bearing that we pressed out and it broke apart in pieces. So we noticed that using this as our pressing device, it matches up perfectly, right? So I just got this 4-inch plate that I bought online. You could actually buy pieces of plate online, 1/2 inch thick, to give a nice flat surface to press against. And now we're going to center this thing underneath there and press away and press the bearing in. What I'm doing here is you could gain a little distance by screwing this out first so you don't have to press as far. It gains you more length from your 20-ton press. Okay, so now you can see we're closer to the material right off the bat. Now we're going to start pressing. What you might find is you might run out of room. You have to press so far, you have to reset. So we're trying not to have to reset. Okay, now I'm bringing the press down. Okay, we got contact. Bearing's going to start going in. Bearing's driving in. Whoa! See, it did that last time. It hits like a lip.
I think what happens is it goes in slightly sideways and then it corrects when it gets about halfway.
That's more like it, yeah. If that's not going in totally square, and then it just squares itself.
There's a relief down to where the circlip, below where the circlip clips. So you can take this bearing and press it all the way until this bearing stops without worrying about your driver bearing getting stuck.
So like Jordan said, you can use this old bearing to press the new bearing all the way in, and you don't have to worry about this bearing getting stuck in the knuckle. We just did it on the other side, so you'll see it for yourself. So when you meet significant resistance, you know that you're done pressing, then you back off.
Okay, we've installed the bearing, and you can see the circlip groove in there, so now what we're going to do is install the circlip. I think Tim has a special method, right?
So you just work it in with your hand. Work it. You got to get it started on one edge, and then
lever it in.
There we go.
Great.
It's in.
Okay, so now we need to put the seal on here and install the backing plate.
So Jordan just putting a little bit of grease on the outer diameter of where the seal is going to be sealing up on this, so it just slides over. He's going to square it up with his hands as best as possible, and then he's going to use a brass drift with a hammer to like knock it in place. Try to get it on as square as you can.
Yeah.
Now I could see right now that this side is high, so
Yep.
whatever side is high, there you go. Now it's going in level. See how he's working the way around, looking for the whatever side's high, and this hitting that. That looks like a good hit right there.
And this seal is not so critical. It's really just a dust seal. So if we're a little bit mean to it, it's not the end of the world.
You just want to sink it in all the way.
Yeah. Okay. And now we're going to apply grease to the inner lip of it. And I'll spread it around Tim's handy dandy grease squirter.
Lubrication, fancy grease squirter.
Great. Okay.
Now he's putting on new brake dust shield, and these are marked left and right. You'd have a hard time screwing it up. And this dished side faces up to give room for the rotor. So what are those, 10 millimeter nuts
Yeah,
or bolts?
12 millimeter heads.
12 millimeter bolt.
Yeah, so these parts are all being replaced in this case because the backing plates and nuts had a little bit of rust damage. You want to be sure that you put this on before you press the hub back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're very unhappy.
Yeah, you'd have to. It's time for a quick intermission to share an important message with you before you watch us press the hub into the bearing. The way we set it up is we put the knuckle directly on top of the press plate. Then we took a press sleeve, like so, with this adapter that comes with the kit I bought. We put this on top of the hub with the wheel lug nut studs facing up, and we drove the hub down into the bearing, and everything worked fine. After the fact, Jordan realized that we didn't do something correct, and this is what we did incorrectly, and I wanted to share with you. We should have been supporting the bearing on the underside while we're driving all this force with the hub into the bearing. So here's one of the bearings that we pulled out. What I'm talking about is supporting this inner sleeve. So you grab a press sleeve that will fit good with it, or maybe it's some type of piece of pipe. This width is right about 2 3/4 inches. So this press sleeve, I have all these multiple press sleeves. This one fits pretty good. You want something that will fit this diameter, but also allow the hub spindle to go through. So it has to be bigger than this inner diameter, but not so big that it goes over the sides and puts pressure on this part of the bearing. So in the next clips where you're watching us do the pressing of the hub into the bearing, just pretend that we had something supporting the bearing on the underside while we're pressing the hub through. So this would be inside the knuckle, and this would be underneath supporting it while we're driving that hub through. The reason why this is important is because the bearing really isn't designed to handle that kind of lateral load going in from the side. Because this bearing has been on that spindle for so long, it gets kind of locked on there. And you can see this play right here. This play happened when we pressed out the bearing. So this bearing is now shot. You shouldn't have this play. This was the first bearing that got destroyed when we tried to press it out. Part of the bearing was still stuck on the shaft of the hub, and we had to cut it off. And you could see all this slop here too. We basically, like I said, destroyed the bearing. So we're trying to avoid destroying the brand new bearing we're putting in, so that's why you want to support it on the back side while you're pressing it in. So far with my experience, I've done rear axle bearings, and then I've done this set of front wheel hub bearings for Jordan. What I've noticed, and it's probably common with most jobs, it takes a hell of a lot more force to press the shaft out of the bearing than it does when you're pressing it back in, because nothing's really locked on it when it's brand new. But when it's been on there for a long time, it gets locked on there. It takes an incredible amount of force to break it free. And then once it starts breaking free, then it goes smooth. You're going to watch us press in the hub, and it goes really smooth. We lubricate the shaft, and it goes in fairly smooth. Did we screw up by not supporting the bearing on the underside? And yes, we did. And so I wanted to drive that home, that when you do your press work, if you're following this video tutorial, to support the underside of the bearing while you're driving that hub through, so you don't risk damaging this expensive bearing. This OEM bearing is about 65 bucks. So long story short, did Jordan and I get lucky on the press work and that we didn't damage his bearing? I think we did. There's no detectable play in his bearing. It's smooth. He's driven it a few hundred miles and everything seems fine. Did we potentially lessen the life of that bearing? Maybe. So don't screw up your new bearing by making the mistake that we did. Support it with some type of press sleeve or piece of pipe on the underside while you're driving the hub through. Okay, back to the video.
Now the spindle is going to drop in this way.
Okay. So here's our setup. Instead of having 4 plates stacked up, we've got 3 plates stacked up. It just depends how much room you have to get all your press sleeves in that space. So whatever works for you. You just got to make room for that back side of the knuckle to hang off the edge. Using a press sleeve with the adapter on top, we're going to drive the hub into the bearing and seat it all the way to where it stops, where we get resistance. Yep. Okay, it's firmed up and it's going to start pressing down.
And you can see that we actually put some grease in there as well. Help it slide in.
Lubrication, people. It helps.
Great. Done.
That's it. Jordan saw it and I felt the resistance as soon as he said it, so we knew we were done. Get that out of the way. And he's going to pick up the whole knuckle assembly. So now,
here we go.
We got the hub in.
Here's the spacer. And so just for good measure, I'm going to just spread a little bit of grease on the spacer.
Lubrication, lubrication. Okay, drop that over the top.
Oh, and take the ding out of our lock nut.
So what he's talking about, that ding that I talked about earlier, it's that little indentation that helps set it and keep it in place. So he's going to take that out with a punch.
Good.
Look good? Okay, so he just bent that back to where it looks more like a circle than an indentation.
So I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the threads, surface here, so that it has less friction while it's tightening everything up. And this is actually going to be setting the preload of our bearing. So now we'll take our tool.
Is that starting to thread on good?
Yeah.
Okay. He's screwing it in just as tight as he can with his hand. That's probably,
that's pretty much
it. Okay.
Hi, Sam. Are you on the movie? Are you part of the movie? No. Into flour?
Okay, like before, we're going to use the spare tire and the rotor to hold this thing tight to where we can torque it to 205 foot-pounds.
A wheel, indeed.
So What we've noticed is that you really have to set this tool into the set ring. Make sure it's really square in there before you start cranking on it. Now again, what I'm going to do for Jordan, I'm going to hold downward pressure because this tool wants to rock out. Not rock out to like Metallica, but to rock out of its purchase. It's cracking me up. Getting a little hard on the hand. Okay, go. Oh, hold on, so it's rocking out. Downward pressure with two hands because I think it wants to rock up.
You ready?
Yep. There we go. That was it. That was 205 foot-pounds.
Good. There it is.
What we noticed on the last one is what we noticed here is that where this set nut drives into the indentation, it's in the same exact spot. So we got this set ring right in the exact spot where it was before. Now he's going to take a punch and he's going to drive that into that indentation, set it in there. There it is. It's done.
This seal goes on the outside of the knuckle, and this is the part where the CV will interface with it. So we found that a bearing actually fits in there quite nicely.
The old bearing is working out pretty good.
Yeah. There's a lip up here. So actually the fact that our bearing broke made it a pretty good tool for this.
Okay. So we're just putting that plate on top as something flat to get an even knocking it in.
Great.
It's good. Now it's
done.
It's done. So here's the finished product. Nice and smooth.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. Nice new brake dust shield. Nice new seals. This is what was stuck on the hub spindle, this part of the bearing. So what Jordan did is he took a Dremel with a metal blade and he made cuts on either side. And then when he was pretty sure that he was almost all the way through, we took a chisel, a big chisel, and we knocked it loose, and after quite a few strikes he was able to split it and it fell off. So he ended up scoring the hub, just barely nicked it. So he did a really good job. He had a really steady hand. But this is what if you're faced with this where part of the bearing after you press the hub out is stuck onto the hub spindle, we couldn't get something underneath the lip to pull it off. So we tried a whole bunch of different pullers and nothing could really grab underneath it very well. So our last ditch effort was to cut it and it worked out pretty good. You just got to go slow, pull the blade out of the cut on a regular basis and take a look and just make sure you're not going all the way through. And then when you think you're pretty close, then stop and try to chisel it out. You could see that the material is much thicker on the bottom. You could see right here. So as you're cutting this out, if you're doing the same thing, just know that you have to cut deeper down here below. So this was the first hub we did that we had to cut this part of the bearing off the spindle. All right, so we're back on another day to complete this job.
Great.
Now that we have the new bearing and seals and associated hardware back in this Tacoma knuckle, we have to pull out his old knuckles, his old CV axles, and we have to replace them with this stuff. So these manual hubs require a different CV axle, so you can't reuse the CV axles that you had on your truck originally. These take a different axle. So when he bought these knuckles used, he also bought used CV axles that will match up to these. So I have the truck jacked up in the front, wheels off the ground. The frame is being supported by 6-ton jack stands. I have one of the rear wheels chalked fore and aft so the truck can't move anywhere. We're going to have the ignition key on so we could have the steering loose, not locked, so we can turn the hub whatever way we want to get at the ball joint bolts or whatever we want to be able to get at, the tie rod. and then we're gonna get the tires off and we're gonna get started on this. So we're gonna get going. Some other things to think about when you're gonna do this job is this could be an opportune time to put new lower ball joints if you haven't already replaced them yet, because they are a known failure point for our 3rd gen 4Runners. And then another one is to replace the upper ball joint. If the upper ball joint is worn out, needs replacing, this would be a good time to do it. If the joint is in good shape, but maybe just the boot is bad, what Jordan did on these upper ball joints that came with the Tacoma Knuckles is he just bought a reboot kit, and the reboot kit came with new boots, a new wire, and the grease for it. So that might be a good way to go if your joint is still tight, but you just want to renew the boots and put new grease in. All right, we're going to take some wheels off. Okay, that's one side. The next side. He's going to break the two 17mm bolts that hold the caliper onto the knuckle. Here, I'll get you a regular ratchet.
That's okay.
Okay, there you get it. I'll get you a ratchet.
Oh, this guy.
Yeah, we got to take that bracket off the knuckle first so we can then move the whole assembly up. Yeah, we got to remove that out of the way first. So Jordan's going to remove that bracket off the brake line bracket off of the knuckle. He's got a 12mm and he's using a Milwaukee cordless. You got to, like I said, you got to loosen it a little bit first. There you go.
It's kind of nice.
Yeah, it makes it quick. All right, so we have our wire hanging. We'll show you where we got this hanging. Jordan's taken out the last bolt. Now he could slide it off. And then he's gonna use the baling wire to hook it. And then tie it up as high as he can. Get it out of the way. We just got it hooked on this with the bracket that holds this piece on. We got the baling wire run through there, through a bolt hole. And so now it's up and out of the way. And then now we could just pull the rotor off. If it's not easy to come off, pound it a little bit with the plastic hammer to break it free, because sometimes it could get rusted on here pretty good if you live in a rusty area or on the coast. And so pound it a couple times, maybe more than a couple times if it's really stuck on there, and then you'll be able to pull the rotor off. So the next thing Jordan's going to do is he's going to remove the cotter pin for this outer tie rod. He's going to spin off the castle nut, and then we're going to break it free of the knuckle of the ball joint with a puller. So Jordan's going to use the impact gun. He's got a short extension with a short 19mm impact socket. He's going to zip it off. Okay, that's off. So Jordan's using a different style of puller. It's actually out of my kit, but I've never actually used it. And that's not capturing the boot, huh?
No, it's just going around it. What's nice is that the twisting is all here, and then it's just pushing. It has a lot of leverage, and so I was kind of impressed when I used it how seemingly low impact it was.
All right.
And it, it was
low impact application, high impact result.
Yeah.
Okay, so the tie rod is free of the knuckle of the lower ball joint. Now what we'll do is we'll loosen the four 14mm bolts that hold the lower ball joint to the knuckle. We're not going to take them off all the way, just loosen them, and then we'll get the castle nut loose and the ball joint broken free of the lower control arm. Jordan is now going to the gun. There you go. He's got one loose.
Yep.
He's got the other one loose. Now turn it. There you go. Okay, he's got that one loose.
Okay.
All right.
All loose.
All four are loose. Next thing, he's going to grab needle nose pliers or some dikes, and he's going to remove the cotter pin from the lower ball joint castle nut. Okay. And then we're going to get that castle nut off and then use a puller to break it free. I think that's a 24, Jordan.
Okay.
Check it as a good?
Yep.
Okay, he's going to zip it off. Now leave it
Okay.
Leave it partially on, and then when we break it free, it's not going to go flying on us. So
Yeah,
I would
good
screw
thought.
it on to where it's past the end of the stud,
Okay.
and then now let's get a puller on, then let's break it free.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like to use this guy. Okay.
Just make sure the tines of the puller go in between the boot and the lower control arm. And this will break free with a little bit of force. Might scare you a little bit. I saw Jordan jump a little bit
Eyes
there.
got real big.
Okay. Before you take the castle nut off all the way, let's get this axle dust cover off first, because keeping the ball joint connected gives us a better platform to pop this thing off. So don't take this off yet. So what we have to get this dust cover free, I have this little knife-edged
Chisel.
some type of small little skinny chisel. You could probably do the same thing with a screwdriver, maybe that you grind down a little bit, but the key is to have the wedge facing out with the flat edge facing the knuckle, and you just pound your way around to get a little bit of movement out of this dust cover. Once you get a little bit of movement, then you switch over to a chisel that's going to move it a little bit further, and then you go to even a bigger chisel to where you can get this thing almost all the way out. And the last step usually is you take up a pry bar and you pop it loose. So Jordan's going to start. He's getting a little bit of movement out of that dust cover every hit. Now he's got a little bit of distance, about the max distance, that little chisel. Now he's going to work his way around to the next size chisel, getting a little bit of movement each time. All right, now he's going to graduate to the bigger chisel and get even more movement. Pop it out away from you and see if you can get it off. Just hit it with your hand, like pop it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Just like that, and hit it
Yeah,
on
it's
the opposite
moving.
side.
Yep. Nearly there.
There you go. So
Excellent.
you could see that we didn't damage this thing. I've seen these like on Sean's truck and other guys' trucks. The mechanic dents the shit out of it, and if you have the right set of tools, like we just showed you, you can take this thing off clean and not damage it, so you have a big old dent and it doesn't fit well. So now, the next thing Jordan's going to do is he's going to remove the cotter pin for the axle nut, pull it out, and then get that lock nut off.
Po folks like to keep our cotter pins.
Not a good idea to reuse cotter pins unless it's like brand new, but now he's going to take that, see this lock ring?
Yep.
You take this lock ring off, and now we can get a big Mamba Jamma impact socket, which is a 35mm socket. We're going to zip it off with the gun. Now, if you don't have a gun, what you should do first then, while you still have your brakes attached, is take the dust cover off, put the tire back on, use that as your resistance, or if you have a buddy with you, take the dust cover off, have your buddy stand on the brakes while you use a big breaker bar to break that loose. Since we have a gun, we're going to do it the easy way.
Great.
Okay, Jordan's getting the 35mm socket on there. He's going to rip it off. There it is there.
That is too easy, Tim.
Yep, guns are nice.
Supposed to suffer for these projects. Man.
Okay, so we're going to leave this knuckle on the CV axle for now. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on getting this upper ball joint broken free from the upper control arm. So the first thing Jordan's going to do is he's going to take off the cotter pin, and then we're going to remove that castle nut. Grab a hold of it and lever it out
There you go. Yep.
like that.
Oh, okay. Great.
You could just pull it out. It kind of destroys the cotter pin, but we're not
okay.
saving cotter pins anyways.
Right.
Okay, I think that's a 19, but double check. What do I know?
19.
It's a 19.
And I'll just put it on the breaker.
Yeah, the breaker is probably going to be good because we're not going to have room for the gun to get in there. So he's got the long breaker bar, and he's going to break it free. All right. That's broken free. You could transition to a ratchet now. Right there. Let's get that 2-jaw puller, the long one. Yep, that one.
Like, right.
Yeah.
Ah.
He's going to get the tines of the 2-jaw puller underneath the lower control arm. He's going to bring the screw bar down onto the castle nut. Maybe screw that castle nut down just a little bit more.
Okay. Just make it flush. Right?
Yeah, flush. Yep. Okay. Now with this longer jaw puller, it makes it a little bit hard to get on that top nut, but he can do it.
Great.
I have faith in him. So Jordan's using a new set of wrenches I got from, what is it, Tecton?
Yeah.
It's a ratcheting 6-point long box end wrench. Works great for this though. It flexes as a flex head. Whoa, there we go. Boom goes the dynamite. Now Jordan's gonna take the lower ball joint castle nut off all the way, pull it out of the lower control arm, push it out with your hand.
Let's see.
Okay, he could just push it out with his hand. Anything else connected?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So we're just going to take this off.
Yeah, I don't know. As long as it's broken free, then I think you can get it.
Yeah.
But watch out, that thing's going to drop and hold on to it with one hand. There you go. As soon as that castle nut comes off, it's going to want to flop on you. There you go. Now you got a good hold of it. And then now you can push it out of the CV axle.
See ya.
There you go. It's out. Okay, good job, Jordan. Was that good, Coach?
Absolutely.
One thing we did that we didn't show is we removed the front skid plate and the rear skid plate. The reasons being, we drained the differential so we wouldn't get a bunch of gear oil coming out when we removed the CV axles. And then the rear skid plate out of the way helps us get access to get the CV axles out of the differential. We didn't bother showing it because we show it in the 30,000 mile service video. So if you want to know how to drain the differential, you could look at it there. We didn't want to waste time showing that. So we assume that you can handle that if you're going to do this job. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop the CV axle free of the differential. And what Jordan's going to use is a pry bar to get in between the differential housing and the CV axle and pry outward to try to break it free from inside. There's a C-clip in there that's set into a groove, and basically Jordan's trying to free it of that groove. Looks like you got it a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Good job. Good technique, Jordan.
Great. Let's see. And now I'm going to get it on a broader surface like that if I can.
If not, let me get. If you got it. Oh.
Ooh, hello.
Got a little bit of. We thought we drained it enough, but obviously not.
There must be a little. Oh, you know what it is? There's a little reservoir.
Oh, there's
here.
a low.
There's actually a bearing that sits in there.
Oh, there's a low point. Okay.
It probably has
Never
a
mind.
little bath in there. Takes a little bath in there.
There we go. Good technique. Okay, the CV axle is out.
See ya.
So this thing that I'm moving with my finger back and forth, that's the C-clip that fits into the differential and fits into a groove, and that's what you're trying to break free is this C-clip right here. So once you pop it free, you can pull the shaft out. So Jordan is just gonna use some super lube to grease up the shaft of the Tacoma CV axle and get it ready to go inside the differential. So he's put in an extra amount on that C-clip. I read in the factory service manual that they give a hint that if you have the C-clip opening facing down towards the ground, you'll have a better chance of being able to knock it in a little bit easier into the differential. Jordan's going to re-grease the inside seal on the differential. He's just applying some grease on the lip of the seal at the end of the differential housing.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah. So now he's going to insert the shaft in. It's only going to go in just a tiny ways, but you can feel when the splines line up. And then when you get it lined up, you hold it there, then you grab your long pry bar with a hammer and you pop it in. So he's just working it around trying to get to where that spline is lined up. So Jordan's going underneath and trying to get it lined up easier here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's in. Okay. So now the key is I'm gonna hold this here for Jordan while he resets. He's gonna want to get up here. So what I'm doing for Jordan is I'm holding the CV axle parallel to the ground. He's gonna get on one of the flanges and he's gonna try to knock it in with the hammer.
Oh yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Rotate it. Okay. Rotate it again. Rotate it again. One more time.
That's it.
Seated.
Okay.
Great.
So let me show you over here what he was hitting on. so you have a good idea. He was hitting right here. He was striking, you know, back here with a hammer, and he was catching the lip. He was hitting it, getting a little movement. I was rotating it, the whole assembly for him. He was hitting it again. Do you have to rotate it? I don't know, but the thing is that you strike it on this lip and you drive the splines into the differential to where this C-clip gets into the right groove, and now we're gonna check to see if that is seated by pulling on it. Grab your hand and pull back and forth, and if it's not seated, it's gonna pull out on you, but this sucker's seated. I'm pulling a lot of pressure here, and it's not moving, so the axle with the C-clip is definitely in the right spot inside the differential, so just check that. Okay, so we got the old ball joint off the other knuckle and we're putting it on the new knuckle, and we're using a little bit of blue 242 Loctite. Some people decide to use red, but red I don't recommend because it's going to make it really hard to get these bolts off ever again. So blue is all you need. So we're just going to snug these up. We're not going to torque them down all the way yet.
Okay, so getting ready for the knuckle to install, we're just putting some grease on this. Inside of the hub there's bushings and needle bearings, and they all need a little bit of grease to be happy. And this is also the dust seal, which we're gonna grease up too. Okay.
So Jordan is sliding the CV shaft, outer shaft, into the hub, and then he's gonna drop the lower ball joint shaft into the lower control arm. There we go. He's gonna get the nuts started a little bit. There you go. And then now we're going to get the upper ball joint pulled down. So this is where it takes an extra set of hands in. So I'm going to pull down. Straighten that thing out a little bit. There you go. There we go. All right. We're going to tighten up the castle nut of the upper ball joint first and torque that to spec. Okay, now he's going to grab the torque wrench. Okay, he's going to torque it to 80 foot-pounds. Now he's going to see if the holes line up to get a cotter pin in there. If it doesn't, he's going to have to tighten it up a little more till the holes line up with the castle nut. So now he's going to grab a breaker bar with the socket. He's going to tighten it a little bit more to where he can get the cotter pin holes to line up with the castle nut. Voila. There we go. The ends are bent over. Jordan's going to get the outer tie rod connected to the knuckle of the lower ball joint. The torque spec for this is 67 foot-pounds. Okay, he cinched it down with the 1/2-inch ratchet. Now he's going to grab the torque wrench. To help make the tightening of the outer tie rod easier, we lock the steering wheel so he can tighten it without the whole thing spinning on him. There you go, 67. Now he's got to see if the holes line up for the cotter pin. It looks like a little bit more. Okay, fresh cotter pin is installed. Okay, now he's tightening the lower castle nut with a 24mm socket. He's going to torque the lower ball joint castle nut to 103 foot-pounds. There you go, 103 foot-pounds. Now he's going to see if the cotter pin will fit it through the castle nut or not. So like the other ones, the holes didn't line up with the castle nut, so he's got to tighten it a little bit more to get the hole to line up. Bend it over. Okay.
Now we need to torque these guys.
Now we're going to torque the 4 bolts that hold the ball joint to the knuckle to 59 foot-pounds. Now Jordan's probably going to be able to get most likely on 3 of them, and then we're going to have to loosen the steering to where he can get to the last one. So he can get to these 2. Okay, and he can get to that one on this side. Looks like just that one front corner one he's going to have to turn it a little bit. Okay, so there's one more you got to get, right?
Yep.
You get on it? Yeah,
Nope.
So He's gonna unlock the steering wheel, turn it to where he can get on that last bolt. You turn the wheel to the right. That should be good enough. So now he's locked the steering wheel again, and he's gonna be able to get on that last bolt and torque that to spec.
So we have the CV installed in the knuckle, and the knuckle installed in the truck. And now to set up the hubs, you can see this is the spline shaft of the CV sticking out, and you can see the bushing of the hub in there. So first we put this washer, it's a toothed washer, it goes on. And then there's the snap ring.
So he's spreading it out, sliding it over, and then he's gonna push it in place until it snaps into the groove.
Let's see. I don't have my screwdriver, so I'm just gonna use this handy dandy
Improvise.
file.
Okay.
Great.
So it looks like the C-clip is now in the groove.
Yep. So now we're going to put a little bit of grease on the splines here. And we're ready to put the hub body on, but first we're going to put a fresh gasket onto the mating surface and check that your mating surface is flat. Sometimes people beat on these and you can get some little high spots. So we'll stick the gasket on here. The gasket doesn't really do that much, it's just kind of to keep water out of the hub body. This is the hub body. This is what's called the inner hub ring, and this is the splines that mate with the CV. And so locate the blind holes with the pins, and get the splines to engage. There we go.
Okay.
It's on. Now we're going to install these with the cone washers, and the cone washers like to seize, so I like to just put a little bit of grease on the outside. So the cone washer looks like that. It's a split washer that's conical. Toyota uses these on a lot of things. They basically add strength to the joint design, and it also helps positively locate the parts. So what I'll do is I'll show you one of them going. So we put the cone washer, the washer, and then the nut. In this case, I actually had some factory acorn nuts from a first gen 4Runner, so that's what I'm going to use because they look kind of cool. So we'll get them all installed like this, and then we'll torque them.
So cone washer, flat washer, and then the nut.
Yep.
Jordan is just going to tighten these up to feel. He's not too worried about the torque spec. He's just going to cinch them up tight. He's got a shorty little ratchet. It's a shorty little 3/8 drive. He's not tightening them like crazy. He's just snugging them up nice.
The spec is about 18. Now we're going to put the hub dial face on, and let me show you how this works. So you have a spinning part in the middle that's free and lock. When it's free, this hub dial is all the way retracted like this, and then when you turn it to lock, it slides up these cams and pushes down in. And so you can see what it does. You have little cogs here that mate with the body that's fixed to the hub, and then splines on the inside that hit that inner hub gear and connect the CV.
What you're seeing is until you lock that, the CVs aren't going to be turning, but as soon as you lock that hub, the CVs will now start turning, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Great. So we install these in the free position with the thing down.
Okay.
We've got a new gasket on it.
New like star-shaped gasket.
Exactly. The Toyota old-timers call that the star gasket. So I'm just going to put, you don't have to pack these by any means with grease. They just slide a little bit, so just put a little light coating so everything is nice and free. And then if you look, you can see there's a little tab. There's two of those, one here, one on the opposite side. And you locate that with the wide slot. So you have two, one wide one. So locate that tab with the wide slot.
With the wide slot, okay.
And it has to be in the free position down. And boop, there we go. Oh, you know what? I forgot something. The gold bolt. This bolt is sort of like a safety. In case there's something wrong with your snap ring, it keeps the CV from pulling out. So this will stop it in the hub. And this is also a nice low torque. Just kind of snug it.
Okay, so that bolt in the center is just like a safety
Yeah.
if the C-clip fails. Okay.
Exactly. Little 10mm headed bolts that are quite low torque. You definitely just want to really snug them.
Okay, so he's going to get all those started and snug them up. So he's just cinching these up with his little shorty ratchet again with a 10mm.
Okay, now we can see how this works. So right now we're free, so I can turn the hub separate from the CV entirely. Now if I turn it to lock, and then it actually kind of has to spring its way in. Now
look at that. So
we're connected.
Look at that. So
And now I can
unlock
get
it
free.
again. Look at that. CV axle's not turning. So that's how your manual hubs work. That spring mechanism makes contact with the splines when you lock it, and when you unlock it, it pulls it back. So now it's turning it.
Now what's cool about this, since this truck is equipped with A.D.D. as well, is you can drive around with your hubs unlocked, but then if you're riding trails one day or something, you can lock your hubs, and then every time you shift, it'll connect and disconnect in the front. So it's just kind of double disconnect, if you will.
Gotcha.
For whatever that's worth. There we go. Great.
Now that we got the hub on and we determined that it works fine, now we're going to get the brake rotor back on, we're going to get the caliper back on, and we should be done with this side. So Jordan's now going to put the rotor back on. Boom. Now we're going to have to unhang the caliper from its purchase there with the baling wire. He can slide the caliper over the rotor.
It's a pity we didn't do a Tundra brake upgrade while we were at it.
On your brake upgrade. Sick mods. He's going to get the bolts started, and then the torque spec for this is 90 foot-pounds. There's the top one, now he's doing the bottom one. There we go. Jordan is now going to get the 12mm bolt that holds the brake line to the knuckle back in. No torque spec for this, he's just going to get it nice and snug. Okay, that's good. So we're almost done with the job. Don't forget to fill your differential. If you drained it like we did, fill your differential with some fresh 75 W90 gear oil or whatever special synthetic gear oil you want to run in your differential. The factory service manual suggests 75 W90. And then when the fluid starts pouring out of the fill plug, then you know you're full. Then put the fill plug back in, torque it to spec, or just torque it till it's tight. So don't forget to fill your front differential. Once you got your differential filled, get your skid plates back on, and then torque your wheel lug nuts to 85 foot-pounds. So here's a question. What do you do with these old knuckles and hubs and CV axles that you have taken off of your rig? Well, I guess you could save them if you ever want to go back to the A.D.D. system, the automatic differential disconnect, or you could sell them on eBay or Craigslist, or maybe you have a needy third-gen 4Runner friend that you want to help him out and give him this stuff because maybe his bearings went bad and it's cheaper just to swap the knuckles and to deal with swapping the bearings if you don't have a press. So whatever you want to do, but you got extra parts now. So this is what the finished product looks like. He's got manual hubs on his third-gen 4Runner. Let's see the other side. Not that it looks any different, but looks pretty cool. Something different. He's the first kid on his block with manual locking hubs on a third gen.
Great.
All right, we are done with this job. It was a split between 2 days. What we showed you in the first day is that the Tacoma manual locking hub knuckles that he bought on eBay. So his knuckles came with brake dust shields that were really bad shape. So the seller had actually taken them off because they were in such bad shape. So some people might find knuckles like he did and have good dust shields and the bearings feel good, and you might say, okay, I'm not going to touch these bearings because they feel good and I don't have a press and I don't want to deal with all that press work. But we were forced to press out the hub to get a new brake dust shield in position, and when you press out that hub spindle, 9 times out of 10 you're going to destroy the bearing like so. It's going to come out in pieces like it did on our first one. If you're lucky, it comes out clean, but the thing is is that this thing has been on that spindle for a long time, and it gets kind of locked on there. So all that force you took to push that spindle out of the bearing, it's most likely going to destroy the bearing. So it's best to just buy new bearings, new seals, and do it the full way. So then on the second day, which is today, we took off his old knuckles, we took out the CV axles, and then we put the new stuff back on. And Jordan did a good job of explaining, how the manual hubs work and blah blah blah. So another successful repair at Timmy the Toolman's garage. We thank you for watching. If you have any comments, comment in the area below. You're free to ask questions and I'll answer them. Thanks for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and special guest Jordan. And we'll be back with more videos. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Do you think the repair was a success? Welcome to Toyota Time. It's in.
Okay, great.